Okay, so Friday live day, right? Let's get to it. I'm gonna invite another amazing guest of honor, guys. Just bear with us and a few technicalities first. Let's get to it. All right, we made
Hi,
it. Hey,
everyone.
I'm really glad to see you because we had been planning this for like quite a few time, right?
Exactly, and I feel just infinitely privileged and super happy about that.
Oh.
Thank
I
you.
mean, we'll definitely talk about the topic, but before, I would like to preface by saying that, Natalia Potapova, or Natasha, as you like to get by, right, on VK, is not just an amazing teacher, like a treasure trove Lexis, but she is a go-to person when it comes to the lexical approach. And I'm saying this with all my heart, because if I wanted to learn a lot about the lexical approach and chunks, I would go to you. Okay. But at the same time, I think it makes perfect sense to start, first of all, with your language learning journey and how you found yourself both learning and teaching lexically. All right, Natasha, so can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. This, I'd like to again thank you for having this. I mean, given this very warm welcome, and I think you're a bit exaggerating here, of course. Because I know a thing about chunks, but not that much, as you believe me to. Yeah, frankly speaking, my love for chunks has started, quite a long time ago. And the interesting thing was that I started focusing on chunks quite a long time ago. And then recently I've realized that these things actually are called chunks, and this process is
Mm-hmm.
called, and this approach is called lexical approach. And basically, I was just super willing to imitate great speakers. I would listen to them, write down some nice phrases and just start to imitate, and practice and practice. And then I just end up seeing some progress. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I got enthusiastic. And again, I mean, more chunks, more phrases, more imitation. I mean, I was reading loads, stealing something nice from BBC articles, and then end up feeling more progress. And on that, I got to realize that, okay, this is lexical approach, and these are actually
Mm-hmm.
chunks. So I think you have kind of a similar story.
Oh, yeah. I mean, tell me about it. It was all about this conscious approach to learning for sure. I don't know where I got this from, who I got this from, but it was all about like, just sitting down and spending time with words, like the same I would spend with my loved one, but again, being aware, being in love, being like wanting to internalize a word. And I don't know about you, but when I, started looking for resources to pick, some phrases, expressions, and everything, I would like literally get a notebook, this traditional approach, and write, but not just write words. I would write those so-called chunks, And now, by the way, when I'm trying to like go back, into that time, I look at these, filled out notebooks with expressions and everything, and I realize
Like,
that oh, by the way, we didn't get ready for that, it's just spontaneous. And I was just going through that, and I realized that whatever I was writing, like these sentences, they actually were all about these so-called chunks. But I would also, opt for some of the word clouds where I would like visualize those phrases, I don't know whether you are an aficionado of word clouds, by the way.
yeah, not much, but I'm a fan of mind maps. But I kind
Ah,
of approach
right.
mind maps to as a way to practice to kind of reconstruct your knowledge. But again, same stuff. I just take a glance at some random page and I see something like that. So I was just a fan of
Mm-hmm.
context, and I was writing out everything in context. And just the first thing that catches my eye is something like, this affair had put a chill on their relationships. Again, put
Mm-hmm.
a chill on their relationship. Quite a nice one. Though, all words are absolutely familiar, and they were absolutely familiar to me back then. But I don't know that I would never ever have come up with this phrase on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And why wreck your brains? You can just get something nice from them and memorize it. So why not?
Exactly. You see, so probably at that time we realized that if we just, wrote down those words, we would just get bogged down in them, and how do you get out of this bog, right? You just try to probably use it, yeah, but how can you use it if it's just a word? You don't know their word families, you don't know the relationships the phrases are in together, right? So This is where I think we started. Yeah, right before this so-called marketing thing, yeah, which is the lexical approach, right? Anyways,
Absolutely.
obviously today's topic, as you can well imagine, is the enigmatic world of chunks, right? Like what, why, how, when, where. And we're going to answer when and where, right? But before that, I think it makes perfect sense to start talking about the lexical approach in general, because I get very frustrated when I hear words like, it's just marketing, Stan. I mean, it's just talking about the same old thing, using new world terms and everything. And I'm like, wait, but what do you mean by the lexical approach? When I ask this question, I hear nothing. So I think it makes sense to finally, cross the T's and dot the I's, as they say, right? When we were talking a little bit with you about this lexical approach term, I loved the way you worded it. Can I read it out for everyone?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Please
By the
do.
way, Paul joined. Wow, Paul, please stay with us.
Oh, I
We
feel
would
super
like
privileged. We'll start
commentary.
blushing.
You see how prominent you are. Now, you said, and I'm going to, we spoke in Russian about that, but I will try to render it into good English. You said that the lexical approach, to sum it up, is not just about memorizing and drilling those phrases, right? It's about factoring in certain things. For example, lexical precision, appropriacy, tone, which is an intention, yeah, colligation, set uses, and the list goes on. I think it makes perfect sense to have you walk us through the intricacies of all of those things. Let's start with your idea of the lexical approach again and those terms. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much for phrasing it in this elaborate way. I think I did actually worse when it was doing that. Thank you. So the thing is that lexical approach, the way I view it is, I mean, I can't even think of talking about it as something effective or ineffective or marketing or, some ploy to sneak you into buy new books or whatever. But this is just something that works. It does work, and I do not really care what we call it if it works. Okay,
Right.
so and may I just start a little bit from afar, so to
Sure,
speak,
have
to
at it.
the lexical approach. And I think before we get started on this one, before we get started on the lexical approach, we have to understand how language actually works as a system,
Yeah.
right? And we know that I mean, I'm going to talk about super brainy stuff. Don't care if you struggle to follow me. I'll
Go
just do
for
it
it. Go for
you
it.
know, in some human words. And the thing is that it all stems from theories of how we actually learn a language, right? How humans learn a language. You remember that previously we had this theory by Chomsky that language consists
Mm-hmm.
of grammar, which is universal. And we even have some tool in our brain which kind of has this grammar embedded and installed. And then you kind of take this grammar and throw some words into this grammar. The way Hildella puts it is absolutely fantastic. It's like you give your students grammar, then you give them vocabulary, and then you kind of expect them to perform some alchemistry to connect everything together. But now things have changed, and we have this cognitive perspective, and within cognitive perspective, we know that language is acquired as any skill by a person, like using your brain, using your cognitive abilities. And language is viewed as a complex thing, and we can't actually separate grammar from lexis because they act together. And this is where actually chunks stem from.
Mm-hmm.
Here we can start talking about kind of collocation, I mean, grammar that is embedded into some phrase. We know that virtually and theoretically, we can take a word and use it in any tense, right? But this might seem awkward, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because native speakers, or I mean, general language doesn't work like that. For example, let's take this a nice phrasal verb to take aback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, we
Like
can't
that.
use it actively, take aback, but who uses that actively? Nobody. We often say, I was taken aback, he was taken aback, I'm totally taken aback, or he was taken aback. My friends seem to be taken aback by my success or something, right? So this is it. It's passive, and we only get to know that from chunks, right? Because chunks help us, so to speak. I hate this phrase, but I often have to say this. They help us kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Mm-hmm.
We learn lexis and grammar together. So this is
Right.
quite a nice thing, right? So when it comes to, again, appropriacy, same stuff. I remember you're absolutely I mean, marvelous stream with Paul, and you were talking about this idiom cup of tea. And we
Yeah,
often use it in negation, right? It's not my cup of tea. I do not say it's my cup of tea. Yeah, I can, but it would be weird, right? So I say it's not my cup of tea because this is
right.
again some sad grammar, and these are only chunks that actually help us realize that.
Mhm.
It's one thing. When it comes to appropriacy, I can come back to the phrase that I randomly picked from my notes,
Yeah,
past years, and it was something like, "This has put a chill on their relationships."
right, right.
Right? So I do not say put a strain, though it is possible, but I say put a chill because I want to be a little bit more precise. It's not that the people were kind of, pressurized, but they somehow become, cold to each other.
Hmm, hmm.
Right? So put a chill on their relationships. It's about precision. It's about how precisely you can phrase your feelings, ideas, and all that stuff. And the thing is that even now that I'm quite hopefully proficient in language, I know that I would never ever created this phrase on my own. Come on, that's impossible, I believe, right? So I can
Agreed.
only absolutely, or something like some time ago in my course, I taught my wonderful students in Aschanic. So kind of this teacher inspired me to greater efforts, right?
Hmm,
Inspired
hmm.
to greater efforts. Okay, everyone knows inspire from elementary, it seems to me. Everyone knows effort or efforts from pre-intermediate or something. But how much can it take us to think of this preposition, inspire somebody to greater effort? Very
Hmm,
little, I think. And
hmm.
even at proficiency level, we might not know that. But come on, why wreck your brains about that? You just go, you see something nice, and you kind of steal this for your own language command. Yeah, inspire somebody to greater effort. So, and that does the trick. And this is, again, this is appropriacy, right? So
Hmm.
these are all the things that we do with the help of lexical approach when grammar is connected with lexis, right?
I like the way Hugh Deller once said, it's first of all, English is a chunk-based language, and any other language, right? And also, a chunk is some sort of vocabulary with grammar embedded. I like it. I just remember it instantly, and it makes perfect sense. Never a true word spoken. I mean, whatever you're saying right now, I would just second that every second of the talk. Let's move on with tone. What did you mean by tone? Intentions.
Yeah, again, you know that it all stems from how we view language generally. So you know that some decades ago, language was viewed as just a symbol system of signs that
Mm-hmm.
is used to communicate. Now, thanks to some discourse studies and pragmatic studies, we know that language is a little bit more complicated than that, to say the least.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that whenever we say something, we kind of want to achieve some communicative goal. For example, now we want to inform our wonderful followers. A little bit later, we might want to kind of, impress someone or whatever. So, and we have to take this into account that each time we say something, we might want to achieve something, some goal, right? And this is all about tone. You might want to criticize someone, you might want to mock someone, ridicule someone, or praise someone, or again, express your preferences. And this is all embedded in language as well, and we have to take this into account. For example, can you remember this phrase, it's about time you did something? And again, your wonderful conversation with Paul that he often used this sarcastically. Like,
Right.
it's about time you helped me. Yeah, don't you think so? Or something like that. Yeah, I want to reproach someone. I want to be sarcastic. I want to even kind of mock someone if the situation is about that. So, and this is important, and this is present in chunks, of course. Of course, it's not that, each chunk is going to have a certain tone, but some do. Yeah, and we have to be able to
Most.
do this, of
Most
course.
do.
Yeah.
Really. Because think about that. Remember the phrase that we also mentioned, one of my favorites is to pick a bone with someone. Yeah? Have a bone to pick with someone.
It's
You cannot say, oh, if you don't do your homework, I will have a bone to pick with you. I mean, it doesn't sound right, you see? So I think it makes perfect sense to just learn English when it comes to chunks, learn both English, grammar and vocabulary together as one unit, right? So as for set uses, what did you mean by that? Again, it was about that my cup of tea, by the way, right? Yeah, those
exactly.
intentions, right?
Yeah.
So generally speaking, it means that the lexical approach is not just about chunks. It's about making sure that you are aware of what you're doing, taking this conscious approach to language learning, spending time with words so they can get internalized. Yeah, I like sometimes to joke with adult students and they understand my jokes, and I literally say to them, listen, to remember a word, you need to переспать со словом. You know, I say that, okay? Because it makes sense. It's not yours until you literally fall in love, you know? So it's an act of love with a word so that you can, like, be the one who would reign it, okay?
Exactly.
So,
And you know, we often hear people kind of complain or feel sad about things that, come on, I cram this, I do my best to hammer this into my head, and then I
mhm,
can't use that. What's the problem? And the problem is that sometimes there is a huge gap between just seeing a phrase or a chunk and being able to use this. And this gap is all about a lack of knowledge. That's why whenever I have my students, my new students in my course, which is kind of chunk based and lexical approach based, I mean, this is something for C1, I have this question: what does this mean to know a lexical item?
mhm,
They often say at the beginning something like, you know the definition, okay. And then we see why definition is never enough. Okay,
right.
just because when people say, I know the word, but I can't use that, or I know a chunk, but I can't use that, it means that they just do not know it, in fact.
Mhm.
So
Or they
yeah,
just know the translation and think that the way the word works in Russian would work in English, which is a
absolutely.
total faux pas to make. Yeah, when you
Mhm.
start speaking English, right? For sure, for sure.
Exactly.
So generally, the lexical approach is again about this, as we say in Russian, осознанный подход к обучению слов. Yeah, it's important to make sure that you spend time with words because, listen, I don't know about you, by the way, and you guys, let us know whether you actually teach or learn lexically, okay? If you do, just leave a plus for us, all right? Thank you for comments, by the way, about our not bad English.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a compliment of the highest order. Um, when I was working at schools, I worked at two schools and a university. I observed a lot of classes, and generally what I saw was the act of learning for sure. It was quite serious, it was quite professional, but the lack of time spent on actually learning and internalizing vocabulary. It was all about like quick reactions, like you learn a word, you notice a word, next time you're supposed to recycle it. But how about those stages that I talked about in one of my previous live streams? Remember this noticing, retrieval, creative use? Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
Exactly.
on the same team. You see, no one notices that. They think that it's a waste of time. And most importantly, Natasha, I would like you to comment on this. A lot of teachers admit that sometimes they think that spending too much time with the same list of phrases means boredom. Like, we're getting them bored, our students. We are not going anywhere, but I think that far too little emphasis is being put on it. I think it's not about boredom, it's not about entertainment, it's about learning. It's about being aware, it's about raising consciousness. What do you have to say on this?
You see, I can may just come back one point
Sure.
before. What I mean is that, of course, it does take hell of a lot of time and hell of a lot of work. But and I do understand those teachers who feel anxious because they kind of, they
Mhm.
judge their progress by the number of exercises they have
Right.
completed. And it's absolutely understandable because sometimes we see that we have kind of syllabus that forces us to think so. But if you take a look at, if you consider a real language learning, we have to understand that our ability to memorize something and use something consequently, I mean an item, it doesn't depend on how kind of many exercises you have done and on
Right.
how many times you have written the word. Can you remember back at school we would be often made to write this 10 lines of one word?
Hmm.
No, our success doesn't depend on this. Our success does depend on how much cognitive effort we have made, on how much we have made our brain work, or plug away on an item, because this is, again, this is how our brain works. It's our conscious learning. And what I'm driving at, the more time you spend thinking about how an item works, the more contexts you analyze, the more you kind of consciously manipulate it, the more likely you are to use it in practice. So while you're wasting this time on studying, on looking at contexts, on, you know, going to dictionaries, or, you know, watching films to get exposure, the more likely you are actually to use this in your own language, right? And this is what we often get overlooked. So you're doing this not because you're wasting time, but you're doing this because in this process you get to memorize this. And this gives you chances to use this in practice. And when my students kind of start, moaning about, come on, that's so long, it's so difficult. I do not have so much time. And, you know, whenever I kind of talk to them about some principle flexes work, the thought that I see running in their eyes is, you know, calculating time. Where am I going to get so much time to do all that? But I said, come on, guys, you either do it this way and you memorize and your English is brilliant, or you do actually spend some time, but you do not get results. Yeah. It's like you spend time anyway, but the thing that important is whether you get your outcome, I mean, your final outcome or not really.
Fair point, you know, because, you know, on my part, when I have This Is Us course, you know, this Is Us course or one-on-one classes, we spend 3, sometimes even 4 classes on one episode. It's like 20 expressions, you know, 20 phrases, and it's like 6 hours, you know. And my colleagues, when they come to me, first what they say is like, wow, so it means like a month spent on one episode? And I'm like, yeah, but isn't it about the journey? Isn't it about the fun with words? Isn't it about just trying to make sure that they look great on you, that you use them correctly, that you're not just using them for the sake of using them, yeah, but for the sake of driving ideas home, you know? And then time passes, they mellow down, and they kind of understand that, you know, yeah, it takes time, let's take it easy, I'm not rushing anywhere. You know, Anastasia says, yes, learning a language is all about time, for sure. Listen, there's no panacea, right?
Absolutely. And you have to use this time wisely just to get something as a result, not a list of phrases. Okay, I've learned that, I've ticked the boxes and that's it. But your result is all about your ability to use this precisely, appropriately, confidently. And, you know, I can say that the same is the case with my course. It basically consists of 3 modules. Let's call them episodes, okay? Yeah. And within each module, I have about maybe 25 lexical items or something, right? Maybe 30. And we spent 2 months manipulating them. Of course, I put them in different contexts. We do different communicative tasks. We discuss, we debate, we compare, contrast, whatever. But still we have one and the same set of items recycled, revised, recycled, revised. And then, you know, I just come on, I finally can use this. How come? How do you do that? I mean, this is what my students say. They just get impressed. Okay, you're doing this, and then you somehow start using all that, and it's not, you know, this pain in the neck any longer. Yeah, and this does the trick.
Agreed. And how fun that is to realize that they're already yours, and they don't have to rack your brains. You don't have to look it up in the dictionary again or start all over again. Yes, Paul says here that is it about less time? No, it's about more time, for sure. The operative word is that you have to spend as much time as possible with the word, spend some quality time, let's call it that way, yeah, to ease the process of learning. And then you will see that the word becomes your friend. You're getting amicable, right? And then you're chummies. So that's what we meant. Anastasia says, that's why the Learn English in 2 weeks offers don't work.
Absolutely, they do not.
Don't get me started.
It depends on what you mean by English. If you mean learning a couple of items, that's okay.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It seems to me that they mean a bit different thing.
Oh yeah, tell me about it. So now it makes sense to start talking about, you know, some of the questions that you sent us, which will outline today's discussion, right? And I think one of them is, we're getting there, by the way, 2 chunks, yeah, generally, how to detect them, how to find them, how to work with them. So we're going to share some ideas and techniques. Bear with us, okay? It's just a matter of taking baby steps, isn't it? Exactly. And one of the questions that we got was quite a common one. I think this is something that a lot of teachers sometimes really dwell upon, okay? Would you like to read it, Natasha? We will omit names of the books, I guess, right? The first
Okay.
one.
Okay, yeah, I can. So, not a question, just a thought which has occupied my mind since the advent of lexical approach. All of us are taught by, or at least familiar with a course book that is often used at universities. Each unit of the book starts with a text with some phrases in bold. I do not use the words collocation or chunk on purpose. All the following unit tasks are based on the active usage of these phrases in different contexts. Isn't it the example of lexical approach? Yeah, this book is outdated, but the approach is also the same. So what's the principal novelty of modern lexical approach? Just marketing. No, it's not
No.
marketing. Just one important point to
We're
mention.
not getting paid, guys.
Yeah,
I wish we were, though, but
yeah.
no.
Yeah. So I think that the principal novelty about lexical approach is this kind of, rational or conscientious or thoughtful approach to language. So I wouldn't even call it kind of, methodology, but I would call it the approach, not even to language teaching, but approach to how you actually deal with language.
Right.
So, and this is exactly what I just discussed. So words are not isolated. They kind of cooperate with grammar, right? And consequently, it's better to learn them in chunks just for you to see this cooperation, because it can help you sound more authentic. Because no matter how knowledgeable we are, sometimes we can never phrase a thought the way native speakers do, okay? Because we just have absolutely different mother tongue, and it does influence our perception of things. And so you just take this item and you sound more authentic, okay? So also it's about lexical precision, it's about appropriacy when you take into account grammar and tone. And this is basically it. But as far as I remember, these books, they just give you some, prefabricated language items in some limited context.
At best.
Yeah.
At best.
Exactly.
I mean, not
Exactly.
always.
Yeah, yeah, and they just ask you to repeat these patterns. I mean, absolutely mindlessly, I believe. So, but what we should be doing is we have to be rational about language. And again, so what does this mean to be rational and to be thoughtful? Please take into account appropriacy. Please take into account precision. Please take into account this embedded grammar, which is collocation. And also, we've been talking quite a lot about the kind of theoretical things, but let's maybe discuss how we do this basically in practice. So what does this mean? Where can we get this information of precision?
Sure. Before we dive into this, I'd like to pick up on what you said. Don't get us wrong, guys. You can use whatever book you want. It should be outcomes or any of these that will teach you a lot of things, really, which I also have. It's about the approach. The problem is we are not trained well enough to understand that it takes a lot of time, and the teacher is this pivotal figure that has to put it into execution. You know, the book we're talking about, the very famous book in all universities that is still being worshipped, is obviously not bad. It's the approach you take to executing it is bad. You see, it's like you think that just going through those activities would do the trick. It wouldn't. It's all about making sure that your students learn how to work with those words. Not just like, for example, when it says, translate the following words, learn them by heart, yeah, then recite them as a poem. Okay, they do translate, but what about the classwork? What about the conscientious approach? What about making sure that you provide students with more contexts out of other resources? Yeah, what about using what you're teaching? Yeah, not just forgetting this when you study the next unit, because that's what happened when I was being taught, you know? And also, one more thing, I can't, but I have to say that. Remember that episode from Yeralash? Everyone watched Yeralash, right? There was this episode where a schoolboy had a recorder on, and he was supposed to repeat, I'm going down the river. I'm going down the river. And actually, he was using a chunk, because this is vocabulary with grammar embedded. But he also had a parrot, some sort of a bird, not exactly a parrot. So the parrot was also all ears, you know, and he was just listening and listening, repeating, but he wasn't being conscious. So it's the bird that ended up repeating this phrase, because the bird was all ears, you know. Even though it's funny and humorous, the bird started saying, I'm going down the river. I'm going down the river. But the boy didn't understand what he needed this for. He was not serious about that. He was not explained all the intricacies of learning those chunks. It wasn't just about repeating, okay? So that's the problem with today's education mostly. We think that those activities that are very nicely designed are definitely something that we need and is the one and only approach. No, okay? And also Paul says, agreed, and more importantly, the teacher needs to constantly work on their English. Yeah, I mean, duh. So let's now talk about exactly some of the techniques and things we can use, yeah, to better the process. One is the Angelina. Angelina asks, is the lexical approach used with any type of students, or is it only for diligent and nerdy ones? Again, you see quite a similar question, right? What do you have to say on this?
I can say that perhaps, you know, not nerdy students can find it even more useful. Because if you're nerdy, you can take whatever and do miracles. But if you're not really, you need to have something, I don't want to say spoon feeding, but some support, let's put it this way. And these chunks actually do provide some support because you do not kind of, you know, give your student one word and expect them to make a sentence or a phrase which would require, you know, knowledge of some grammar and appropriacy and syntax and whatever. But you give them a ready-made phrase, and they kind of are able to use this. But again, there is a very important caveat here. Ready-made phrase doesn't mean that they kind of parrot it, like this parrot from your story. No, so you kind of, again, have this conscious approach so your students can understand the meaning, they can understand, more importantly, situations and contexts in which they can use this, yeah? So they have to, again, consciously approach this to understand the meaning and the use and all these nuances, but you make their life a little bit easier by not expecting them to, again, take word, grammar, and combine this, yeah?
Agreed.
So I can say that even with less strong students, it works even better. The same goes with children, by the way. So how do you feel about it?
Yeah, by the way, it also answers the question whether the lexical approach is just about like C1 or C2, the levels we are working with. Of course not, right?
No way.
Right.
Again, I think that what we're talking about here is that we a little bit, again, make our students' life easier by not expecting them assembling everything from scratch on their own, right? And if advanced students still are more or less able to assemble because they're kind of clued up about grammar, they have a lot of practice, they have a lot of experience, I mean, in their background, then beginners or elementary or pre-intermediate students, they're not experienced at all. And you remember that even in some basic books, we have these phrases like, I was born in something.
Sure.
Even at the beginner level, and this is a chunk. I hope you won't going to be expect a beginner student to know passive and all these verbs, right? But you just teach them these chunks and they go ahead using it very confidently and I would say happily, because you kind of save them from having to wreck their brains about grammar.
Right. But something goes wrong when we just progress, right? Like at the beginning, we're really doing a good job. We're introducing those this functional language, yeah, those senses for practice, some of the speech patterns. But then as we progress along, we kind of forget about that. You know, it's like, for example, when a mom teaches her, daughter or son how to speak language, yeah, any language. They are like experts, but when it comes to studying a language, yeah, a new language, they're like, how do I go about it? Same with this, yeah. For some reason, we just lose this grasp of how to go about it, right?
Yeah, and I can say that we have to be quite careful about comparing, like acquiring first language and second language, because when you kind of acquire first language, you're in this kind of environment, and you do not basically have any choice. And I can say, take some advantages from this approach in this second language context. Why students start struggling is that perhaps they just cram these chunks and they never come back to them again.
Yes.
This is one thing. And the other thing is that they do lack exposure. Yeah, because exposure matters. You put yourself into this environment.
By the way, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because then Alex asks, some students find it difficult to put a chunk in a sentence. Why is it so? Let's dwell on that a little bit more. You said that it's of course a lack of like let's put it that way, repeated exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Yeah, so first of all, this is repeated exposure, and I would say that this should be some kind of limited exposure. Of course, you do not expect elementary students to listen to some BBC podcasts,
Yeah.
right? So this should be something graded. It's one thing. Another thing I might assume, again, lack of understanding. Because if you understand the chunk, it means that it becomes yours, right? As you
Mm-hmm.
mentioned
Mm-hmm.
some time ago. And if it hasn't become, it means that maybe there is some lack of understanding. Maybe students don't really have an idea of how it works. And most importantly, I often kind of preach to my students and I bombard them with one and the same idea. Whenever you're learning a Lexis item, please imagine a situation in which you could use that.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this important? Because one thing is that it's personal significance, and we know that when we feel that something is significant, our brain kind of, okay, I need that, so we get to memorize this. It's one thing. And another thing is that you shorten your path to success.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you have an item, it looks beautiful, okay, I should take it for myself, but you have no idea of how you can use this. And it
Yes.
means that not only do you have to kind of memorize this chunk, but you also later on have to think about the situation. And sometimes you do not. And this
Mm-hmm.
is where the glitch starts, right? So whenever
Mm-hmm.
you are kind of, learning something, please think of the situation in which you could use that. For example, I can again take a look at my random uh,
Sure.
list. So I have this, he chafed at the idea of promotion, kind
Mm-hmm.
of, he was irritated. And I loved it so much because I often chafe at so many ideas you can't even imagine. And I can say that sometimes I chafe at the idea of, reducing some time spent in my English, which my relatives want from me, right? I chafe at the idea of having more day offs in my schedule or something like that. And that's nice. And you kind of, it becomes yours, right? So
Right.
this is, and
Exactly.
this can be an obstacle to you, right? Again, lack of exposure, lack of understanding of the meaning, and lack of understanding of the use. So students don't understand how they can use this. For example, if we are talking about this, I was born in Moscow. You can teach your students, okay, when you complete some, questionnaires, you often might write something like that. Okay, or when you're talking about your biography, you can use this. So you kind
Mm-hmm.
of you put your students into this understandable context. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it boosts the chances.
Yeah, this kind of autonomy is what is important. Like, let them play with the words. Yeah, let them feel the phrase. Let them ask questions about it. Yeah, maybe
Mm-hmm.
some ideas will conjure up, right? And by the way, it also helps a lot with this so-called co-text, right? That, for example, can be read about in the Teaching Lexically book, right? As far as I know, like from what I get, I would say I understand co-text is this language that occur around a particular item, right? Which means, for example, when you teach your students some phrases like "thank you," what do you expect to hear? "You're welcome," "not at all," "don't mention it," "you got it," "no biggie," "always," whatever, right? This is called co-text, yeah? When you say, "Can you do me a favor?" you also expect something like, "Sure, go ahead," or "I'm sorry, I'm busy now." So you
Mm-hmm.
might want to consider teaching phrases with some sort of, expected language, I would say, yeah, in a way, because this is how it works, right? Or, for example, when it comes to learning or teaching A1, learning English at a elementary level, or teaching students at A1, you could think of a certain phrase that you may start with, yeah, and go from there. For example, sometimes we can talk about an argument, yeah, when we discuss relationships. You could say, you can like pre-teach this phrase, have an argument, and then you can think of like what kind of stages those two people go through when they have an argument, right? Literally, you can elicit some language, right? They
Absolutely.
make a lot of noise, they speak in high volumes, which is a good chunk, right? They might be at each other's throats, yeah, they might end up fighting like physically, yeah, they might report on someone, whatever, for example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they
Mm-hmm.
may just end up amicable, you see? So this is what you can do to make sure that your students understand in which situation a certain phrase or word works, right? And also
Absolutely.
teach phrases along the way.
Yeah,
right?
right. You know, now even I have, I'm working on my new project now. I mean, this is kind of lexical kind of little textbook, and it's kind of devoted to healthy lifestyle. So this is access we can use to talk about
Hmm.
healthy lifestyle. And you know, the thing I've decided to open the file with is, you know, the number of problems we face, kind of information overload, stress, and all that stuff. Again, so this is healthy lifestyle, and supposedly it should be something like, do fitness regularly, join yoga classes or something. But I've decided to I've decided to start with problems we face
Hmm.
today. Like we have
Hmm.
this barrage of information, and we feel exhausted, we feel the burnout. Why? Just because let's imagine how we talk about healthy lifestyle in real life. We usually say something, you know, I have backaches. That's why I've decided to join yoga class.
Right.
So usually we talk about some problems that have forced us to to go healthy on eating and whatever. And this is exactly it. So that's why whenever you teach your students something like, you know, join yoga classes, teach them backaches, it will help them. That's for sure.
Exactly. And you don't even need lists. If you're a really well-versed teacher when it comes to vocabulary, they will flow from your mouth, like literally. Because again, another interesting thing to remember, repeated exposure to the same item speeds up both learning and fluency, which we will talk about, right?
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly.
By the way, another good question. How many chunks per lesson would you recommend to teach a teenager and an adult? The level is not mentioned.
Yeah, I just can remember this phrase of yours and Paul's, like, how long is a piece of string? Am I right?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, this is
exactly.
exactly the case. Yeah, because okay, it depends on kind of what level students you have. Because if you have more proficient students, they're likely to have really great passive vocabulary. So that's why this chunk might be not completely familiar to them. That's why you might increase the number of items. And also sometimes let's try to understand what a chunk is. A chunk is a piece of language, right? That piece, I mean, some range of words that often go together. And sometimes it's the case that all the words are familiar to a student, but they just wouldn't assemble them this way. For example, my phrase, put a chill on their relationships. Yeah, put chill relationships is fine, but perhaps you wouldn't assemble it this way. And in this case, when all the words are familiar, but this is just some set phrase, I think the number can be quite big, maybe up to
Right.
20 in one class, right? But if chunks contain some words that are absolutely new to your students, it would be a bit different, yeah? Maybe up to 10 or something per
Hmm.
class. So how do you feel about that?
I feel exactly the same because it all depends on how much you worked with those items that the students already know in your combinations. If you really did a deep dive into those, well, I would say seemingly obvious words like chill, put, yeah,
Mhm,
relationships, then obviously when they meet them in a different context, it gets easier. They just need to remember that they might go together and in what
absolutely.
situations, right?
Mhm,
So
mhm,
it's no big deal then. When I teach C1 and C2, again, as I said, each episode contains like 20, sometimes 25 items. But again, I make sure that we literally break them down. Like literally, they watch the episode at home. Then they come into the classroom. Before that, they have a scenes compilation video where they watch expansive contexts. Then we literally try to connect the dots. Like I would ask, for example, we have a phrase to get a handle on something. Yeah, get a handle on something. I would be like, think about that. Get a handle on, like literally envision that in your mind. A handle is this thing. Yeah, if you get a handle on it, it's like you're gripping and then it's in control, right? So metaphorically it means to just get a grip. Yeah, have a grip on something, to be in control of something. And then we start like thinking where it could be applicable in our
mhm,
lives. I'm
mhm.
trying to get a handle on my sleep because I have been sleepless, for example. Yeah. Yeah, you see, yeah. Paul says less is more. I love this one, by the way. I even have a
Absolutely.
T-shirt with it. Better 10 items than 30. And yes, exactly. But again, it also depends on how much time you spend with them. When you spend 6 hours and 20 phrases, I think it's like a win-win situation.
Exactly, exactly.
You see?
And
So
when it comes to, I'm sorry, you go on.
no, I'm done. Yeah.
Yeah, so what I was just about to say is that, again, it depends on the chunk, right? And if the chunk contains some unfamiliar words, here I have a little, but very, very significant remark, I must say. This is, again, about 10 items. We know that usually a chunk has some, core word, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, some
Mm-hmm.
central word, which kind of forms the chunk. For example, put a chill on relationship. I would say that chill is this kind of core
Yeah,
word.
sure.
And when the core word is unfamiliar to students, this is what I do in my own practice, in my own courses. I encourage my students first to take a look at the chunk and understand what it means and work on the meaning and use. But then I really want them to work on this word in isolation, right? Because, for example, recently I've had something like, this approach will turbocharge your progress. And
Mm-hmm.
turbocharge was the new word. Of course, we focused on the chunk, but then I got my students to work on turbocharge in isolation, just to see how this word works in different contexts, what it means, in what context it's more frequent, what kind of register and tone it has. Why I want that is, again, about this thoughtful and conscious approach. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want my students to be parrots who repeat these chunks
Exactly.
mindlessly, but I want them to understand what this means and in what contexts it works. And even in quiz that says, I'm sorry, I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but
No,
it
it's
was
fun.
just the same goes with Quizlet sets. I usually put a chunk, I mean the whole chunk in the Quizlet set, but then I'd have this core word separately in some more contexts, just for students to have this very balanced and multifaceted approach. Okay, you focus on chunks, but you also focus on the meaning of the item you do not know.
Mm-hmm.
And you get some more chunks from that. You see, so many chunks.
Mm-hmm.
Great. And in
Same
this case, of
here.
course, it's unrealistic to master more than 10 chunks. I mean, within a couple of classes.
It does depend though. I mean, you know what? When it comes to me, for example, I'm so vocab hungry all the time. You
Mhm.
know, it's like this I know thirst, so to speak, and each time I come across an interesting phrase, idiom or chunk again, like with the familiar words, yeah, but which go together the way I wouldn't use them, yeah, because I'm not native speaker. I would literally like feel that I'm getting more powerful and better language wise, you know? And to me, it doesn't matter how many I come across. I just like the fact. I do not consider them as something that I need to get over or come to terms with or get a handle on, you know? For me, it's like, wow. Even now, you're teaching us this put a chill on. I actually didn't know this one before. And now, by the end of the class, see, magic happens. I mean, everyone knows the phrase, right? How great is that? You see, so I couldn't
Exactly.
agree with you. I do the same thing with Quizlet, especially again with those who are really ready to get to know, the phrases on a deeper level. Let's put it that way, for
Mhm.
sure. By the way, how do you like gaps, gapped senses?
Apps, I love them. I could say, totally in love with them. I mean, this is kind of, very banal thing, I believe. But, especially with today's, all this fashionable to use and, looks like magic. But I still love them and I don't really want to discard them because they're effective. They put a chunk into a context. And this is by the way what my preset sets look like. So I have a definition and then I have this gapped sentence. And I do give gapped sentences in classes. I do give them per revision because this puts an item into some meaningful context. And again, talking about context or context, if you're talking about this language piece, I
Mm-hmm.
usually do my best to find something really illustrative, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I say that kind of, what can I say? It can kind of, turbocharge your progress, full stop. But I say, this approach can turbocharge your progress because it gives you better chances to, deal with potential problems. So you kind of choose such contexts from which it is possible to derive the meaning. And again, picture this situation in which you potentially could use this in your own
Mm-hmm.
language.
Mm-hmm. Could bad memory be a stumbling block when it comes to learning chunks? My question for you.
Yeah, so here we can refer to all this, cognitive specialists, and certainly they say that yes, poor memory can impede, learning because memory is one of the components of successful progress. But again, I wouldn't put it too gloomy Okay, because language and learning chunks is a very nice way to improve your memory. And from my own experience, I can tell you that when I started my CPA preparation, I mean, maybe some 2 years ago, I was quite proficient. So I started my CPA preparation already having quite a solid city. At least
Hmm.
I deem myself to have had it. So, and I was quite, again, chunk passionate and, this language nerd. But I realized that by the end of the course, which lasted for about 7 months in this, wonderful Polina Coding school, I actually improved not only my language, but I improved my learning skills immensely. And it was just enough for me to take a glance at the text and I could remember all the chunks from the text. So what I'm
Hmm.
driving at is that over the course of 9 months, it wasn't only my language that improved, but my learning skills improved just absolutely incredibly. And I was absolutely taken aback to realize that.
See,
So, yeah.
I mean, conscious awareness is key. That is for reals, for reals. Then we got a few more questions that kind of bring us to more techniques, ideas, resources, and everything. One of them is it true that learning chunks is probably the best way to improve students' fluency? And by the way,
Absolutely.
before you dive into it, please tell me what your idea of fluency is. Because
Yeah.
some people think it's about talking like that. It's fluency. I'm talking rapping. Is it
No, 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 no,
fluency?
no. Yeah, absolutely. So, fluency is again, it's all about your ability to use language, yeah, in kind of to express your ideas. And fluency is not all about speed, okay? It's never about speed, by the way.
Right.
You can speak slowly, which I'm totally incapable of, so sorry about being too quick sometimes. But fluency is all about your ability to produce meaningful stretches of language without inappropriate breakdowns. For example, if I say something like that, it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So you see, I can't produce a meaningful stretch. But
Right.
if I produce a meaningful stretch, then I take a pause, then I produce another meaningful stretch, then I take a pause. This is fluency. And here we have to elaborate a little bit on what a meaningful stretch is. A meaningful stretch is exactly about a chunk, right? So that's why we can say that chunks, of course, are an integral component of fluency. And this is exactly what makes fluency. And even if we go to the wonderful Scott Thornbury, we will see
Yeah.
that he says that your fluency is determined by not your command of words, but it is determined by your command of chunks,
Yes.
right? Because again, our oral speech is spontaneous, and consequently, the less we have to assemble on our own, the more fluent we will be. And that's why your chunk are kind of, the surefire way to fluency, to being able to produce those extended, meaningful stretches.
By the way, when you watch Natasha back, you will notice at least 5 chunks that she used. I was trying to focus on how you are saying that just to prove your theory. Because obviously we weren't getting ready for this talk. I wasn't thinking like, oh, I have to say this phrase for sure, or I have to use this chunk. We're talking from our head and heart and experience. Yeah, we're not thinking what to say. Why? Because of the lexical approach, because of this conscious approach to learning phrases, spending time with words, as Roxette once sang, yeah, spending my time, but with words, okay? Yes,
Exactly.
Paul also adds, fluency is a vague term with many definitions. Agreed, but it's definitely not about the pace. You know what? I have students who would need more time to express their thoughts, but their English is so freaking good. It's accurate, it's juicy, it's appropriate, but they would speak like that, and it would take them time to think of what to say, which does not mean they're bad or they're not C1 or C2 or C5, whatever. It just means that they take more time to think of things and they are maybe a little bit more aware of things. They need to process things. You see? I'm a blah blah man. I can speak in Russian or English so fast that people won't understand me just because I'm
Yeah,
speaking
same,
fast.
same here.
See? But it
It's my
doesn't mean I'm
cue, so
good.
I can see.
Right. It doesn't mean I'm good. It's not the pace that should impress you, yeah, but the content, right? By the way,
Exactly.
guys, if you agree with us, please leave a plus or a thumbs up, all right? And we'll move on. Another question. Yeah, so again, let's sum it up. Repeated exposure like a mantra, yeah? Speeds up both learning and fluency, okay? Listen, repeat, explore. right? Recycle.
Again, I would make a little remark here is that, again, when it comes to exposure, it's not like, can you remember we had this kind of approaches to language learning? When you sleep, you listen to something and you wake up being super fluent. I mean, what I'm driving at is that this exposure should not only be repeated, but it should be, again, meaningful. So when you
Right.
listen to something, please notice and please think about these items, okay?
Yes.
This will
Yes.
definitely help.
Yes, because we almost never think. By the way, before we move on, a very important thing that I was also asked, and I was even tried to be, how do I put this one, ingrained when I was in uni as a student. A lot of teachers told me, even though knowing that I spoke really good English at that time, probably they were in denial, I don't know. They told me, Stan, you cannot learn your English without memorizing whole texts. Topics are important. Choose a topic, my hometown, learn the topic. When you start speaking, it will all come flooding back. I was like, are you for real? What do you have to say in that? Memorizing whole texts, how effective is that in your book?
So you see, again, I can start a little bit from afar. I have one wonderful, methodologist, and I just worship her because she taught me one principle, which I swear by. And she says, whenever you do something, ask yourself why
Yeah,
and what your goal is. So, and here we also have to ask ourselves why. If your why is to learn a text by heart and to be able to recite it as a poem, then please go ahead with texts. But if your why is to be able to speak English, no. Okay.
mhm,
So you can learn collocations, you can learn chunks, because chunks actually constitute our language, right?
yeah, yeah,
But not texts.
yeah.
Okay.
What do you think the problem is with memorizing text? Because a lot of people would say, wait, stop here, but aren't we learning chunks when memorizing this text? Huh?
You do learn chunks, right? But the thing is that the kind of stretch of language is too big, yeah,
Hmm.
because you do not reproduce the whole text. And what I'm driving at is that we should cram and memorize the stretch of language that we can reproduce, and we will be able to reproduce. And we reproduce chunks. We do not reproduce texts. Okay, because if you kind of remember some poem by Pushkin, I'm sure you can recite it perfectly from the beginning to the end, but it would be very troublesome for you to recite it somewhere from the third line.
Right,
Okay,
right.
mm-hmm.
I couldn't agree
Because
with you.
the sequence matters.
Oh yeah, you know what? The only bone to pick with that, my favorite phrase, hi Paul again. By the way, Paul did say something on fluency. We will read it out a bit later. The only, like, I have a huge bone to pick with text in this respect. Let's put it that way. All right, a topic. First of all, who was it written by? Usually if it's this сборник тем, please just burn it. Really, I can say it like straight into your eye. Burn this, okay? Because first of all, it was written in the Soviet Union by non-native speakers like us, and however great we are still non-natives. We can produce texts, of course we can, but we can't produce them to that level of authenticity. I'm sure Paul would agree, okay? Because he's watching. Still, something tells him, at least, that we're non-natives. First of all. Second of all, we live in this unfettered access to information. Why would we learn from someone who wrote some sort of a topic about some vague town, about some vague places of interest some time ago, right? Third, if it's a topic, it should be written by a native speaker who takes into consideration the learner's needs, level, right? Make sure that it sounds as authentic as possible, because don't forget that when you're speaking English or when you're writing English, those are two different animals. Okay? Written text is totally different from speech, even if you try to mimic it. And we talked about that with Paul too. Polina says, you're brilliant, guys. Thank you so much. By the way, Polina is going to be with me too in 2 weeks. It's going to be a blast. And when you try to produce it as a native speaker, okay, it's half the battle. But then do thorough work with this topic. Spend time literally trying to peruse each and every phrase. Yeah, analyze it, break it down, assemble, disassemble, I don't know, learn it, recite it, for God's sake, right? But spend time not just translating, okay, not just reading or reciting. Okay. And you know what? It always kind of sets me off on the rant because it's like a really sore subject. It's still practiced. Teachers don't understand that you can't just memorize. I cannot imagine coming up to a native speaker like Paul, and Paul tells me, "So, how's the weather in Belgrade, mate?" And I'm like, "Oh, the weather in Belgrade is usually fine. But usually, in summer, it gets quite hot, you know? Really? I mean, who speaks like that?" Right? So that's what matters most. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if we still talk about texts, I can suggest a very nice approach to how texts can be kind of used a little bit more efficiently. And here I can also kind of highlight the principal difference between cramming texts and between using texts.
Yes.
For example, I love texts. I'm a fan of texts. I'm besotted with texts, and I do get a lot of vocabulary from this. And you can see that my texts look like that. So see, I have the whole text and it's highlighted there.
My books look like that.
Absolutely. I can say, some atrocities that have happened to this book. Yeah, as with proficiency. I know that Paulina will bite my head off for this because she loves books. And I do some, absolutely merciless things to them. One moment. I can find some. Yeah, it basically looks like this. So I highlight everything, no chunk slips my attention.
Right.
And then I run this. So what I'm driving at is that I do need text. I highlight some nice chunks in them, and I do not even write anything out. So I just leave them in the text. I can scribble a couple of notes here, again, just to understand the meaning better if the item is completely new to me. But I use text mainly as a source of meaningful context, right? So I learn a chunk, but it is still placed into the text just to provide some meaningful context for me so that I can put myself into this context. I can understand, I can feel, something can resonate with me. I mean, some ideas, and this kind of gives me better chances to eventually end up memorizing it and being able to use it. So text shouldn't be something to cram, right? But texts should be your source of meaningful context in which you put these words or chunks or collocations, whatever.
While we're doing this serious talk, you guys are just having fun. We like it so much. How's the weather in Belgrade, mate? It's gloomy today. You see, that would be a good answer. Which continent, Paulina asks. They're just taking the piss out of us. Yes, I agree with you. Again, you see, it all comes down to being a good noticer, observer, yeah, as you said, and really wanting this. Really wanting to be a better teacher, a better learner. You know what? Sometimes I get questions like, all right, C1 English, C2 English, doesn't matter. Why do I need this? I teach lower levels, and I wouldn't need that. I would disagree. I know I'm this kind of disagree man, yeah? But I would disagree because, first of all, teaching lower levels is such a feat. That's no small feat. Okay? And you're supposed to really know a lot. Yeah? Especially when you teach the communicative approach with like young learners. Yeah? Second of all, who told you that the amount of something you're supposed to teach is the amount of something you should know? Right? I mean, how about some personal gain? Like, I like it, I enjoy it, it's my profession. I'm a go-to guy, when it comes to learning and teaching, right?
Absolutely. And I can also add that sometimes, oh, come on, why should I have all this proficiency if I teach beginners and I'm not going to teach anyone apart from beginners? But the thing is that we can be preaching whatever. I mean, we kind of, we have put ourselves on this pedestal and we are kind of preaching this, oh, you should do it this way or that way. We can preach whatever, but you can only start using something really great if you personally understand this. So what I'm driving at is that my approach to teaching, if I can call it this way, it has been immensely influenced by the way I personally learned that language, right? So, and I've already told you that I kind of started making progress in language, learning chunks, being quite good at grammar long before I actually realized that what I'm doing is lexical approach, basically. So what I'm driving at is that your language proficiency can give you a really nice insight into how language works generally, and consequently in how it should be taught. And this will do miracles to your teaching practice. That's for sure.
Yes, like dig deeper, understand why you need that. Yeah, learn from that experience, listen to your gut. Yeah, and that's where you go. And that's how you go. By the way, another question is, can students simply avoid learning grammar by learning only chunks, hence without understanding how words are related to each other in a collocation grammatically? What do you think?
It's a bit of a slippery slope, so we have to take a lot of things into account here. Virtually, if you take, this vacuum and, some unicorn in this vacuum, yes. But there are so many, just hell of a lot of buts in real life. It's one thing. It all depends, again, on the purpose. If you are learning a language for the sake of passing an exam, especially, Russian state exam, of course, you need to be quite knowledgeable about grammar because you will be tested on your knowledge of grammar, not on your fluency, not on how authentic you are, but this is going to be specifically tested. The same, but to a lesser extent, goes with Cambridge exams. You get specifically tested, in much incomparably more reasonable way than what we can have at schools, not in any school, just in some cases, but still it matters. It's one thing. And of course, here you need to have some specific knowledge of grammar because, again, you have to demonstrate this specific knowledge, right? It's one thing. Another thing is that imagine that there are some students, they do not care about any exams, they do not care about any grammar, but they kind of believe that the way they should be taught is that you give them some formula, and ask them to follow this form, and they believe in that. This is their learner's belief, right? And you might be endlessly brilliant. You might kind of have super powerful lexical approach, but if you start teaching them this way, without any grammar tables, formulas, whatever, they will question your approach, and they won't be confident. And no matter how fantastic you are, they will not trust you, right? And that's why they will end up just thinking, come on, what is she doing? Or what is he doing? How can I learn this way? Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing, or maybe he doesn't know what he's doing. Maybe he's a bad teacher. Maybe I have to go to some grammar translation classes, whatever. So the reality is that you can be infinitely perfect, but it all depends on your students' needs. Sometimes your students just need to know grammar specifically, and it also can depend on your students' beliefs. We know that, affective filter theory, or the concept, that when your learners don't believe and when your learners do not find it significant, they will never learn that. Okay?
Yes, agree, really. You have to make sure that they understand why, what for, yeah. And by the way, also, I'd like to pick up on what you said on this. You mentioned that, of course, it's not just about like chunks, yeah. Make sure that you spice it up with some traditional explanations, yeah. It's fine, some theory, because how come are your students going to learn their grammar by just learning chunks? It will be great if you do both of it, yeah, like the chunk with grammar and the rules and the practice, because you cannot just accumulate, for example, chunks with the present simple embedded, yeah, or I don't know, chunks with passive voice embedded. You will still have to teach the basics, yeah, the smattering. Let's put it that way. So I think it's both. It shouldn't, I think, resort to just giving rules and activities, but also learning them in chunks and analyzing, even beforehand. But at the same time, it shouldn't be just about teaching chunks. Today we're just learning chunks, tomorrow too. Yeah, it wouldn't work. So we need to find this happy medium, this golden medium. Yeah, let's put it.
Absolutely.
Agree?
For example, the way it can be done practically is that you somehow have some, content-based manipulation. Kind of your students read the text, or they do something with language, something meaningful with the language that contains these grammar structures. Then you have some explicit explanation. Okay, so today we're going to talk about passive voice. Passive voice is from this way. We need it there. We need it in this context. And then you might ask your students to come up with these sentences or the chunks that they think they will use more frequently.
Right.
For example, we can say something. I often get asked the question, blah, blah, blah. It's a nice chunk, and it's passive, and it's highly usable. Then the students come up with these chunks that they believe they will use more frequently. Then they just memorize these chunks, and you kind of, again, you combine the benefits. You do both. They can understand why it is done this way, and also they have something active in their active command just to use straight away. And later on, they will be able to extrapolate this understanding on into more structures, and that's fine. So you combine the benefits here.
Oh yeah, agree, really. And also probably the best bet would be to teach, for example, present simple, yeah, and just do some activities. And then when you come across chunks with present simple, just make a special point of it, yeah, and say, listen, this is present simple. Let's look at how it is manifested in this very chunk, yeah. How, like, ask questions which would also lead to understanding, yeah. So this is how you do it. So it's not like you learn grammar and then you separate it from vocabulary or you separate it from speaking. Always make sure to make them aware of it, because we might think, come on, it's obvious, present simple, yeah, or this passive we get asked, but it's not for our students. They don't have that much exposure, right? That's what matters.
And exactly, it's all about this conscious understanding, meaningful approach. And again, in this case, please do not forget about recycling and revising and exposure. For example, it's not that you've covered present simple once and you never come back to it again. But each time, whenever you encounter some nice chunk in present simple, please draw students' attention to them. Please ask them to analyze, okay, why do we use present simple here? How does this work? In what kind of situation do you think you could use this chunk, more importantly? Yeah, so this is kind of constant work and work and work. And meaningful approach, conscious approach.
Yes, combined, yeah, not just one thing. Don't get us wrong, the lexical approach is not just about chunks, it's about everything, but with the operative word, awareness. We're getting some comments here. I'm really happy, guys, that you're commenting along the way, asking questions, supporting us. Please go ahead, do that more. Paul says, I have to go, guys. 30 CAE essays need marking. Have a good one. You're one to watch out for, Natasha. I am. Then Olga says, many unmotivated wouldn't respond to any theory as they only need to hone a few things. Right, that's why you need to tell them why they actually might need that. Yeah, or you need to do a needs analysis and find out beforehand what they need. But again, we need to make sure that they have at least a smattering of the language so that they could suggest what they really need. Yeah, awareness is key. I think it makes sense now to talk about ways of, first of all, detecting, we talked about it, storing, the algorithm of working with the chunks generally, yeah, revising them, working with elaborate vocabulary. This is like, you know, a slew of questions that we got, but with one idea. Yeah, let's now literally walk our followers through the process of detecting, storing, chunking, by the way, itself, right? If we have a text, then revising and also recycling, all right, with some activities. How do you go about it?
Yeah. When it comes to detecting, sometimes it might be really tough to understand whether the piece of language is a chunk or not really, or maybe this is just a sentence and they should ignore this. So the thing I often recommend doing is that, again, please be conscious about that. Please be kind of reasonable and rational about this. So just, you can take a look at a piece of language that seems to be a chunk and ask yourself a question. Can I use this very piece in different contexts? And how many such contexts are there? And this is, I believe, the key, because if you say, yes, I think I can use it there, I can use it there, I can use it to say this, I can use it to say that, yes, then it is a chunk. But if you kind of struggle, maybe this is just, I mean, some sequence of words. Not
by the way, why would you struggle? Does it have anything to do with how you speak in your mother tongue? Like, for example, if I don't use elaborate vocabulary, the same would go for learning a foreign language.
So you see, I mean, you might struggle because, I mean, this kind of word combination is not so meaningful to you, and there is no use learning it. For example, let's take a look. It might be just some, you know, empty structure. It's not so useful. It's one thing. And another thing is that it might be not so much frequent. Yeah. So this is just a combination of words. For example, the biggest danger that lies with working on authentic resources, especially these articles by BBC, especially by The Guardian.
Yeah.
Right? So this might be just some poetic turn of phrase which has been invented by the author, or some metaphor which has been created by the author. And chances that you're going to use it are quite slim, right?
Yeah.
So there's no use.
Or if you're really proficient and you can play with words and take artistic liberty when it comes to using a language, then yeah. Like, for example, the one that I once cited, I'm sorry, I have too much on my plate. Well, let me know when that plate clears. See? Like
Uh-huh.
artistic liberty. And if you can really incorporate it into your speech, if it's appropriate, then it creates a wow effect. And then a person would be like, oh, yeah, sure, I will. Yeah? It'll create a certain emotion. It will trigger them. Right?
Absolutely. But here again, you have to be very careful about appropriacy, and you'll
Mm-hmm.
have to be kind of very, very sensitive to language, to sense whether it is appropriate in this context or not really. And of course, the frequency will be quite low, right? So it's not that you're going to say it
Yeah,
in every.
you won't find this phrase, let me know when that plate clears, in any
Yeah,
dictionary, right?
absolutely.
Right, exactly. So then we detect a certain chunk, we try to attach meaning, emotion to it. What do we do next in your class?
Yeah, so first we detect a chunk, right? And then we somehow manipulate it to understand the meaning, right? Because basically we have this noticing, retrieval, creative use stages, right? But noticing is a very complex stage. It doesn't mean that you only notice something, but
Mm-hmm.
it means that you have to study the meaning, you have to study the use, you have to take into account all these nuances. And personally, I start kind of manipulating these chunks with my students. For example, if we come back to this put a chill in the marriage, you might ask these questions like, what happens to people's relationships when something puts a chill in them? How do they feel about it? I just have to make sure that they understand what this means. Or do people feel happy when something puts a chill? What they may end up doing as a result? What can it lead to? Just so that they can understand this complex meaning and this complete picture of what the chunk means. It's absolutely vital, I believe.
Oh yeah, it's code text. You're talking about code text. That's what I love using all the
Exactly.
time. By the way, one of these books that I keep showing you because they're really the Bibles of the lexical approach. Yeah, lexical
Exactly.
grammar and teaching lexically. I like where Hugh and Andrew say that if you take a very vivid example, the one was with argument, the one that I cited. But for example, with something that is really relevant to a student. For example, a mortgage, yeah, or a loan. What do? You notice a chunk. Take out a loan from the bank. Then you shouldn't stop at it because again, okay, a person can say, I took out a loan from the bank, but how do you say платить за него, yeah, something like that. I don't know. So you start asking them questions, making conversation, and eliciting this vocabulary. You could say, what happens next? You have to pay your monthly bill. If like you do not settle your payments, then they might repossess your property. So you like literally store, brainstorm those chunks. You store them, you discuss things, and also something pops up along the way. You might talk about their experience. You can ask them, have you ever taken a loan from the bank? What for? You see? So this is how you can learn that, right? You don't need any list then, right?
Absolutely. And even Andrew Walkley actually accepts that sometimes teachers might feel a bit worried because this does take up hell of a lot of time,
Yes.
right? But he says that this is the best way you can spend your time because here again
Mhm.
you combine the benefits. You dig deeper into the meaning, so you get to understand the meaning better, and also have a lot of emergent language that is super useful apart from the meaning. It's one thing. And another thing is that I just come back to something that we mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, that our success in memorizing an item and being able to use it, it doesn't depend on how much you've repeated it, how many times you've repeated it, but it does depend on how much you've made your brain work. Right?
Yeah.
And by manipulating your chunk this, we actually make your brain work. And students end up saying something, we've done a single exercise, but I can remember this
Yeah.
somehow. This is
Yes.
what we can see.
Because a lot of cognitive effort was put into it. And then
Absolutely.
emotions, experiences, yeah,
Experiences.
attached.
The students can relate to that, and they personalize this item. This is kind of the very nice metaphor in Russian that you provided. This is exactly how it happens, right? So this item becomes yours. It's one thing, and another thing, you also remember that some time ago they suggested that you should kind of imagine the situation in which you can use this item, and while you're asking and answering these questions, you exactly put your students in this situation in which they can use this item. Of course, your students might not understand that explicitly, but it does happen subconsciously, and this does the trick. This does the miracle, I believe, in this
Could not
case.
agree more, really. And then, we shouldn't stop at that. In the next lesson, you might want to retrieve it because, again, it doesn't stay with everyone, right? You might start asking the same questions and see what they could say because then you first you spoon-fed them those phrases: repossess the property, pay monthly bill, to be overdue, yes, settle the payments. And then in the next lesson, ask the same question, see what they remember. Maybe you will put a twist on it. Maybe you would talk about your own experience, and then you would like pause and let them say this chunk or gap it. Yeah, take a screenshot, take a like a literal screenshot, gap the sentences in the Paint or wherever. Here you go, you have a story. What I sometimes do, and I used to do a lot when I worked at uni, I would like talk about something like that, and then I would ask students to write, you know, like literally write this story, and like use those chunks so they could like put it on paper and then see what they remember, like right away. You know, 5 minutes before the class, I say, now get a sheet of paper, you know, put it on paper. Let's see what you remember. Okay, it's also good because then they write. Also, what I would do is sometimes I would literally say to them, okay, so you have your Quizlet sets printed out. They love doing that. I'm gonna give you like 10 minutes, literally put in, you know, pop in the earbuds, anything you have there, start so you can hear, yeah, someone else. Start like literally speed reading them, but consciously. You know, like as conscious as possible, as eloquent as possible, from bottom to top, from top to bottom, from the middle to bottom, you know, from the middle to top. And when you do that, you'll see where you stumble, like which words you still probably mispronounce, or, you know, something like that. They loved it, you know, and there was so much noise, but it was like, you know, there was this kind of energy, like chunking, you know, in progress. You know, so
Yeah, right.
mm-hmm.
So absolutely right. So I also gap sentences. I ask them to use that. I do ask them to prepare some stories. For example, usually I'm, you know, this huge fan of making my classes not only packed with chunks but also packed with nice ideas. And we usually read some insightful texts. For example, now in my course we are reading a text about how grandparents can influence their grandchildren, and we all have all these nice chunks like unconditional love. This extended network of relationships, create psychological security or build up psychological security or shield against negativity or something. And I usually ask them something that, okay, so what were your relationships with grandparents?
Mm-hmm.
Please tell us about this. Or what are the most insightful ideas or some ideas that resonate with you? Please tell us about that. It's one thing. And next class, I can do something like that. I can take out some chunks, just chunks from the text. I can give them just a list of chunks, and I try them to remember what kind of idea each chunk refers to. So I, so to speak, ask them to reconstruct the original idea, not the text, but the idea.
Yes, yeah.
Because again, it actually doesn't matter what you do with chunks. What matters is that you have to do this consciously. You have to absorb this meaning, and
Mm-hmm.
you have to do something that is personally significant to you. That's why I never kind of force my ideas, but I usually ask my students, okay, please pick one idea that resonates with you. Or sometimes I even say, please pick one idea that you feel skeptical about. Why not?
Yeah? Yes, so, and build on that. Yeah, use the chunks to build on that. You know what, also, what I mentioned, the word clouds. Why do I like them? Because I would put those chunks either chaotically or in some sort of a shape, you know, and I would ask students to have either an on-the-spot dialogue with me on a certain topic, something that catches their eye, or even summarizing. You know, we would start summarizing the plot of the series using those chunks. So for example, this is like from my book, yeah, from my notebook, and I have these chunks here, you see? So I would ask them to literally look through them. They are familiar with them. They have already recycled them, retrieved them. They see the phrase within earshot. Yeah, within earshot. And I could say, I can hear you talking within earshot, like there's, you know, a husband lying on the sofa, something like that. So something that comes to mind. Or I could say like, oh, I think there are some native speakers here in Belgrade. I could hear their speech within, you know, earshot. So you see, they start like dwelling upon either relevant context all around them or something where they would use it. And they see this and they see this progress. First, they're a bit surprised, like, oh, I've learned so much. This is huge. Exactly. I mean, how can I analyze that? That's a lot, yeah? But then they're like, oh, I can use this one, I can use that one, you know? So, by the way, one of the chunks that I once imprinted here was this one, make English time a routine. See? Okay. At that time, I already understood that. What a great chunk.
Exactly, exactly.
By the way, where can we find chunks? Of course, BBC, Guardian. By the way, I taught mass media English, so I agree with you. It's amazing, the language of the news, so juicy. But apart from such resources, where could we also look for chunks or check chunks?
Yeah, so of course we can actually, I mean, just break this down into two different things. So we can talk about authentic materials. So this can be anything reputable, but again, I would be careful with the Guardian because I love the Guardian, but I have kind of, love and hate relationships with this establishment just because the language is super sophisticated, but sometimes too super sophisticated, for ordinary mortals. So we have to take this a little bit with a pinch of salt, I believe. Of course, some films, series, but again, you have to be very judicious about these things, I believe, especially with films, because we
Yes.
know that, again, always ask yourself why. If you want to sound like Elizabeth II, okay, listen to her and take her chunks. But I'm afraid that sometimes it might be not actually relevant. We better focus on something more neutral, right? So this is
Right.
it. The same goes, we know that we have different characters and they have their own language. And if you want to sound like, some beggar in the street, go ahead. But if you might not, you better concentrate on some different character. So this is it. And also, again, the huge difference lies between written language and spoken language, because sometimes we see students dash into the Guardian, they get besotted and crazy about their language. But the problems start when they start kind of reproducing these words or chunks that are absolutely written, that are super sophisticated, and they might be not really appropriate for spoken language, especially when they just chat, about some daily things.
Yeah, I remember from my mass media class, I had topics like time, privacy, artificial intelligence, and we had phrases like that. But I always said, guys, this is newspaper English. If you want to don this character on yourself, then yeah, do that. Yeah, if you want to make sure you read the news and understand them for a passive knowledge, do that. But where could you say, I remember this chunk I taught them, each time I learn English, I engage in a novel exploit. you know, I mean, it sounds poetic. It would impress some colleagues, our students, but it sounds too posh and too formal and too inappropriate. You know,
Uh-huh.
it depends, really. If you are that person who loves to contemplate life, pontificate, of course. Yeah, but if you're someone else, and if you do not fit the outfit, the environment, the context, then you would just be made fun of. Like, where did you
Yeah.
learn that? Yeah,
Or something like,
that's
learning English is like embarking on a grueling journey that's beautiful, but
yeah,
might be not really appropriate for a conversation,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
So this is it. And the same goes like vice versa. So something that is super spoken and has been mentioned in a film might not do for an essay, for example, if you're
Hmm.
doing this exam preparation stuff. So just always ask yourself why. If you want to write better, maybe written sources are better. If you want to speak better, then you'd better go to films and series. Of course, it doesn't mean like 100% language that has been mentioned in an article is only written, and the same goes with no. But you have just to be very wary of this and very mindful of this.
Yes, yes, really. It's like me talking, through you, really. It's the same ideas. It's interesting
Yeah.
that we're talking for the first time here, right? But we have like exactly the same we're on exactly the same page, literally speaking. I cannot even say like, no, Natasha, I would disagree. I wish I could, but you see, that's what lexical teachers are all about. Yeah, just understanding, awareness, ideas. By the way, I also got this kind of question. Stan, it's easy for you to say, and I understand them because you're like now. You're going it alone. You're a private teacher. You have C1 students. All of your students are teachers. Of course, it's easy for you to sit here and pontificate. But I'm a school teacher. I'm a state school teacher. They say I don't have much time. 45 minutes. Classroom full of students. Themes just like go by in a flash. Literally, you cannot even pause. In this case, I would understand them and say, yes, we're in different kind of environments right now, yeah? But I also, as I said, have been a school teacher, a uni teacher, and I understand one thing, that just rushing And trying to stick to the curriculum and syllabus sometimes is very counterproductive. Yes, you will please your administration, probably. They'll be very happy. But your students will be very unhappy. And then they will go around and say that Stan is not a teacher. He's crazy. He just, teaches us conditionals when we don't understand present simple. So what I did was, I would just, sometimes I really opted to depart from the syllabus, and I would like take out the main phrases that I really want them to know. And I would spend time, no matter what the syllabus said. And again, in the end, we get the same kind of result. Two birds, right? The syllabus complete, the words there. So who stops you from that, right? You can just cherry pick the language you want your students to use. You cherry pick the grammar you want them to teach. You're not the victims of the system. I know that you're let down by the system. You are. I've been there. It's a terrible place. I know that. And I can really literally say that without any shame, because it's true. These days it's difficult to be there. But you still choose how to act in your own locale. Okay? Your own locale defines you. You are the model figure, not the syllabus, not the administration. That's what I think about that.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
do you think?
absolutely. And also, what might get you confused is that, okay, they're talking about some super clever things. Okay, how am I going to implement this in my classroom? But the thing is that what we are talking about is not about it's not about the volume, it's not about the amount, but it's about the approach. And when you have
Yeah.
this kind of approach, then you decide on the amount. For example, you have some text, and usually we have some, target or topical vocabulary from the text, and you
Mm-hmm.
might consider not kind of, giving this, dictation of one word, translation word, but you might consider drawing students' attention to these collocations. So you do not teach them decision, but you teach them make decision. You teach them reconsider decision, depending on the level or something. Of course, it's going to be a little bit more simplistic than what we do in
Yes.
advanced classes. But again, it's not about the approach, it's about the amount. Approach remains the same, right?
Yes. And the syllabus is the same. Nobody will just, stone you to death for that, right?
It's exactly. And also the thing is that again it's about the approach. Maybe when you teach present simple, no matter what class, and I believe kind of the younger the learner is, the more chunk based the approach should be. Right? So they just cram these chunks. And when you teach your students present simple, maybe you might consider, replacing some gap fills with practice in chunks.
Mm-hmm.
And it will do your students much more good, I believe. You can arrange it this way. For example, someone asks, does it often rain in spring? Yes, it often rains in spring. Does it often rain in winter? No, it doesn't really rain in
Yeah,
winter.
yeah,
And
exactly.
this is it. And this is how they have this present simple there, not in the textbook, but there. And this is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, really, fair point. When I was having my teaching practice at a grammar school, we had a teacher like that. I actually mentioned in one of the streams, Olga Viktorovna Chimякina. Again, I keep mentioning because if you watch one day, you're amazing. You're the epitome of a great teacher in a state school. What she did was, that's what she would do. I don't think she was all about like, lexical approach, chunks, collocation, whatever. What she would do is she would work with the text in a way that she would spend 4 classes. I don't think it was in the syllabus. But
Mhm.
the students by the end of the unit would be able to talk about any topic, even environment. She would ask them questions that would nudge them to use the vocabulary. She would ask them questions to brainstorm the vocabulary. She would do spelling tests. She would role play things. I was marveling at her expertise,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And that's where I understood that those are just stereotypes that a lot of teachers don't know their way around it. No, I'm sure there are many of us, either at school, in private teaching, anywhere, who could do it really well. Yeah, it's just about the awareness and being together and just working together as a team. And that's what we're doing here, right? Agreed?
Mhm.
By the way, one more
Absolutely.
approach that I would like to introduce, and I'll give you time to think about yours as well, is the one of the techniques and approaches, I would say, that I picked from a very interesting and extremely competent colleague. You might have heard of her. Her name is Yelena Mironenko. She is not exactly, she doesn't have a lot of online presence, unfortunately, but we'll fix that, I'm sure, very soon. But She is so awesome that you can even envision, guys. I will try to encapsulate her ideas, and that's what I used a lot. And it's not even marketing here or ad, not really. It's just important to talk about this. So she devised some sort of a sentence builder approach. Конструктор предложений. Some of you might have heard of this. By the way, if you have heard of Elena Mironenko and the sentence builder, please let us know. What she did was she would help teachers work on chunks, phrases, and even words at any level with, let's call them deck of cards. Okay, there are 3 decks of cards. The first deck of cards is with the vocabulary in pictures. And those pictures are so elaborate, they were like, they are custom made. Can you believe that? I mean, they were like literally painted by a painter, okay? And they're all so awesome. And obviously, there are many of them, you see? And the second deck would be types of questions. See, affirmative, yeah, negative, right? You can see here questions and everything. The third one would be about pronouns. You, he, right? It, right? She, whatever. What she would do is she would introduce it as a sentence builder where you could combine both. Right, Artyom says I use them, right, because we talked with you about this, right? The approach is amazing. So what she would do is she would start to brainstorm phrases with grammar embedded and practice them along the way. What I did was I combined those 3, so it now became like a slip up, you see? It's like from maybe 2016 when I was working with them. And she would ask students to first brainstorm a phrase or a word, carry, right? To carry, we can see it here, right? Then call, right? Then sleep, then debate or argue. She would introduce a tense, for example, present simple, and say, listen, I debate or argue, you argue, yeah, she argues, he argues. She would pre-teach all of these so they get familiarized with them, you see, all of these pronouns, and introduce a sentence. Then she would start practicing those in these slips, yeah, but in this case it's decks because it's kinesthetic learning as well. And she would start teaching them and saying, look, for example, he carries, see, he carries. Then there would be another card. She carries, it carries, we carry, yeah, they carry. Then next time when it gets complicated, she would say, what does he carry? He carries a box. Then we start again. He carries a box. She carries a box. It carries a box. We carry a box, right? It gets more and more complicated. All those decks of cards get replaced. Then she says, what kind of box is he carrying? Heavy. See? And then I carry heavy box. You carry heavy box. You see? So you literally like speed up fluency, repeating them. You build upon the already known phrases, and the ultimate point, the end game, is that you even come up with an idiom or a sentence or a story using it in a particular tense, and your students along the way become so fluent in it. Then when you just introduce this deck of cards and you literally start replacing them in class, they're like doing it like that, literally. And then when they start speaking, she makes a special point of these phrases, trying to make sure that they use them without it. You see? So that's the difference in the approach. I loved it so much. At that time, she sent me those decks, like the original version. I'm not sure if she actually even sells these right now, only PDF probably. And I would start working with that. And at that time, I was a school teacher. So I would, divide the whole classroom into teams and give them those slip-ups, and they would work. We would work, okay, I will be honest, for maybe 7 lessons. Yeah, so it means 2 weeks, unless they understood the idea and the concept of the present simple tense. But when we were like into a month, they were doing such a great job, everyone, that I was like taken aback. You see, so that answers your question, guys, how you can, for example, learn chunks, phrases, or grammar embedded using this sentence builder. You don't even have to buy it. You may, if you want to have these beautiful ones, why not? But you can understand the approach, just find your own cards, print them out, laminate them, and work with them. And what's important is you can work with any level. You can start brainstorming idioms here. Heated debate. See? Get off the phone with someone. iPhone, by the way. See? Cook up a storm in idiom. Who stops you from teaching that? So it was like just an approach in a nutshell. I just worship this approach, and Alina, she's amazing. Have you heard of this one,
Yeah, I
Natasha?
heard something along the lines, but I didn't. I've never seen such wonderful cards, and I
Oh,
really love it. You say it's all about your approach because
see?
basically the idea is great, but it's quite simple. But the marvels that you do with this is just incredible. And what I'm absolutely fascinated by is that here you combine the benefits again because you work both on fluency and accuracy, right? And the thing is that we often somehow we have this, fluency-oriented activities, we have these accuracy-oriented activities, and sometimes we see these two things as something incompatible. But the fact is that it's perfectly compatible this way, because here you combine the benefits, you practice, you improve your fluency, and you improve your accuracy at a time, which is absolutely fantastic.
And you
So
create a visual image of a word or a phrase, you see? So it's like so many birds with one stone. I'm impressed. And Elena, she actually says that you can get it to such a complicated level. I mean, in terms of like how intricate it could be, that you could literally spread the cards and start telling stories about your lives using the already learned collocations, idioms, and phrases. It's crazy in the good sense of the word, and she would have everything. She would have like even adjectives, with these cards. But again, I won't go too deep into it. It's just an idea to get inspired. It's just, I really believe that you can do whatever you want. Any tools work, but the result should be there, right?
exactly.
Definitely.
And again, you put your students into the context because you create this visual image. And for example, something that has just popped up in my mind is that you can give your students, for example, a number of cards. This would be a sequence, and you would ask them to make up a story. What is happening? Like this
Right.
is one with the phone, and there are people in a heated debate,
Yes,
maybe there's some clash between them or something. Yeah, that's
that's
remarkable.
incredible.
It's great, and it's again about your approach, and perhaps what we've been preaching today once again, it's this common sense approach, this meaningful and thoughtful approach to doing things. So it's not what you do, but how exactly you approach it, how exactly you do this, how do you feel about it.
Yes.
So
You see, and it
that's
still comes out of our own like necessities and needs. It looks like Alina understood at that time that to spice up creativity and fluency and results, you have to devise your own tools, teaching tools. Yeah, Anastasia says, I love it. The amount of creativity is limitless. Agreed, And again, when you do a deep dive into it, you get engaged. You get this new lease on life. When I was working with that, I thought, gosh, it could work with adults. It could work with anyone. It could work with me because, for example, my German, my second foreign language, is really bad now. I stopped learning this. I don't want to resuscitate it at all. But if I one day want to resuscitate it, that's what I do. Okay, because I know the approach, I know the methodology is the same, right? So yeah,
and
it was just very surfacey what I explained. I hope when if Yelena watches this, I hope I didn't miss any important things, because I really want to tell about that. Really, I mean, I will always and always talk about this approach. I even have videos on VK where my brother is experiencing this thing, on a video, and some of my students, and it's like, By the way, we have two more questions at least. A question for you for sure, Natasha. How do you encourage your students to use more elaborate vocabulary? And then Artyom asks, elaborate adjectives, because it's so time consuming to find good and clear context of chunks, and they may not work out. And sometimes it's better just to give translations and Quizlet. Well, guilty as charged. Sometimes it happens too, yeah?
yeah, we somehow, view translation as something that should be frowned upon, something borderline legal.
Yeah, yeah.
But in fact, I often tell my students, even in CP classes and post-proficiency classes, guys, Russian is legal, right? And if you feel like translating, please do. And even if you come back to this, what as Andrew Walkley and Hugh Dallop kind of,
Preach.
advocate, you'll see that they say that you have to get the hang of the meaning as fast as you can. And if translation can help you, please go ahead. And I personally can say that, okay, of course, I do my research into the definition, I do my research in the context, but sometimes I need translation to make it all click. Okay? So it's not that I go only by translation, but sometimes it's kind of, the last piece to the puzzle,
Oh,
translation.
yeah.
And it's nice, especially when it comes to chunks, because if you start explaining some chunks or defining some chunks, it will look crazy. You might have several sentences. So, and why? Why do that? What I would prioritize is, again, having some meaningful context where this chunk is placed. And again, possibly translation. Even in Quizlet sets, I do have translation in Quizlet sets. It's legal, nothing bad
See?
about that. Okay, especially when you have some lengthy stretches, lengthy chunks. Okay, this is fine. This is okay.
You know what I have in my mind is that we shouldn't go to extremes, is all. Yeah, nobody told us. Who told us that using this or that is illegal or not, or it doesn't define you as a contemporary teacher? If it works for you, awesome, possum, right?
Exactly. And again, please use your judgment. Please stick to this common sense approach. Because how I arrived at that was something. Okay, I was creating my Quizlet set. It was some years ago for my kind of advanced and proficiency level students, and I was trying to define a chunk, and I just caught myself thinking that I was doing some nonsense. I had a definition of 3 lines. Come on, why? If I can just use a translation, what's the problem?
Guilty
So
as
please.
charged. With some of my colleagues, we sometimes understand that when there is a certain phrase, but again, it's like a C1, C2 phrase with a lot of baggage. By the way, I remember one of your posts where you wrote that you should understand that elaborate vocabulary is not just a word for the sake of a word. It carries an image. I remember that post. I loved it. I think this is where I also kind of fell in love with you more as a teacher, And you said, don't forget about the image. Don't forget about the story, the etymology, the emphasis that is put on it when you use it, right? And I sometimes find myself also doing the same, like when I start defining a phrase, or a chunk, and looking it up in different dictionaries. One of those I love is Collins, by the way. I would like to know your opinion too on that. Collins co-build. I find myself typing those 2 or 3 lines, unfortunately. And then when I start practicing with my students, I'm like, nah, let's tweak it a little bit. I now have an idea, So there's nothing bad about that.
Absolutely.
If we feel that it's too much. By the way, your go-to dictionary, Natasha.
So again, you have to constantly ask yourself why. For example, if I need something simplistic, and especially it was very kind of relevant to me, some years ago when I was working with all the students in elementary, of course, Cambridge is nice, right? Because Cambridge puts it in a very straightforward way without much sophisticated information, right? So Cambridge is fine. Now Cambridge is a bit different. It has included this corpus section. So now it's a bit different. But
yeah, I saw those.
If you want to have something a little bit more sophisticated, and if you want to have some more context, you can go to Longman Dictionary. I love it, just because it's always have this corpus section, and it's very elaborate. There are a lot of sentences, different contexts, so it's quite nice. And if you want to have something super advanced, then Collins does the trick, I believe, because I love it that it has this kind of, multifaceted approach to defining a word. They have a lot of context. They even show this frequency graph, right? And you can see whether this word is popular now or not really. So this is a very nice thing. Again, Cambridge is something basic, Longman a little bit more advanced, and Collins is quite sophisticated. I can put it even this way.
Agreed. And also I like the way it defines words, because they, for example, say if a horse or a person trots, it means they walk taking small steps. You see, so you see who can trot while looking up this definition, for example. You see how many likes you're getting. Yay! So much support. Yeah, because they have a bit of a delay, and it means that they're liking you right now. Great, awesome. You know what? Also, I think it's important to make sure. Yeah, you mentioned corpus, amazing. We even had corpus linguistic at uni. By the way, did you have this subject?
I love it. I didn't have the subject, but I believe that corpus linguistics has kind of made a breakthrough in the way language is taught and the way language is studied as a subject matter, because it has actually revolutionized the way we approach it.
Yeah.
And by the way, it has ruined all the boundaries between
Hmm.
us being native speakers were kind of, deprived of this chance. Now we are not deprived,
Yeah.
and we no longer ask this question, can I say it this way? Can I put it this way? Just go to Corpus and search it.
Yeah, check it
And
out. Go
yeah,
figure. Yeah.
that's it.
How about Ngram Viewer? Do you use it? This Google Books, what's the English tool? You know, Ngram Viewer with also frequency charts.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it just because it shows the relevance. Because sometimes you might put a chunk in some corpus. Okay, it gives you context, but you're not really certain what kind of context these are. Maybe this is
Mhm.
something dated, right? And Google Ngram Viewer does show the frequency. I really love that. I really love it that it traces the tendencies, right? And I do love this nice distinction between American and
Yes,
British variants.
yes. You go for British more, right?
Yeah, I teach for British exams. That's why I decided that this would be a bit more
Yeah,
logical.
and the way you speak and your pronunciation, off the charts. Speaking of Ngram Viewer, also it's important to notice that you mentioned frequency and context. Sometimes colleagues can't find where the context are. If you scroll down a little, you have those years, right? So you click the year, like the exact year you want to explore the context in, and it gives you like a plethora of different resources. You can even click the link and it will take you to a book with the expansive context. How awesome is that? And you can take a screenshot from that one and gap it. And that could be a great activity for retrieval. Apart from Twitter, by the way, do you use Twitter? Because I'm in love.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that when I was doing my master's research, I used Twitter as a source of material, but then he started talking about Twitter as a source of learning. I said, come on, that's brilliant. Now I do use Twitter as well. So
See?
it's fantastic, really.
I love it so much. And again, I use it just because I can't use Instagram for that purpose. Instagram does not give you, doesn't have a tool for looking for contexts. You cannot just type it in there and it will give you like all the posts with the same phrase. Hence the Twitter. I also started using this in 2016. I was like, oh, that's such a tool, such a tool. You
Mhm.
know, I literally have my own database with tweets, like more than
Mhm.
2K tweets, you know, and sometimes I'm like, let's take a memory lane down the phrases I
Exactly,
learned.
exactly. And by the way, just sorry for jumping in, but I have the same thing on my smartphone. Maybe it's not about Twitter only, but I've already told about this photo of mine. I just have these nice screenshots with vocabulary. I can watch
Ah,
films, so I see I have screenshots from films with characters using something nice. Then I have something from dictionaries, right? So it's quite packed here. Uh,
mm-hmm,
and I just
mm-hmm.
flick through them from time to time and revise some nice chunks, and that's fine. I believe that's really, really effective.
Awesome. Screenshots, right? By the way, Ella says, how do you usually use Twitter? How do you use Twitter, Natasha? Because I'm sure that Ella knows my way.
Yeah, so the thing is that when I was doing my research, I was doing research in political discourse, and I had to analyze these tweets and comments that people leave to talk about elections, US
Mm-hmm.
elections 2020. I was just searching for some, sarcastic phrases because I was doing research in sarcasm, and I just spotted some really great chunks that they use. And okay, I need that. I must steal that right now. And I would
Mm-hmm.
make a screenshot and just memorize it, then come back to it later to revise it, then again come back to it later to revise it. And now I can use, again, following your example, I can use Twitter as a corpus or something like that. For example, I need to check some chunk. I put it into the search line and I see the tweets that feature it. And if I see a lot of tweets, I know that it's frequent, then it's worth focusing on, that this is it.
By the way, also a tiny, let's put it that way, trick. If you leave the page for at least an hour, you will see the frequency. You will see the new tweets building up, and you'll see how frequent that is, especially phrases. You'll see like 10 new tweets. You know, it means
Mhm.
that, come on, people use it all the time. And also, you see, it has to be succinct, yeah, the tweet. So that's why it's interesting to see how natives go about using their language, yeah, and incorporating just a few words into one little tweet. Any other resources you use for like literally rummaging through chunks?
Yeah, so you see, the thing is that I'm a huge fan of Ludwig Guru. Have you heard of it?
Oh, I
I love
know.
that. And the thing, I just watch a bit and I swear by this. And the thing is that basically we have to understand what a corpus is. Basically, a corpus is a research tool. So it's not aimed at learners, it's aimed at researchers. That's why it can be a bit impenetrable,
Sure.
especially if you go to the National Corpus of British English. I mean, it gives you just half a lot of sentences taken from God knows what, right? And you can't make head or tail of what is happening, right? But Ludwig is semi-corpus, which means that it has been designed for learners, right? So that's why the interface is a bit more user-friendly. It's one thing. The second thing is that they feature only language from reputable sources. I mean, the BBC, The Economist, The Independent, all that stuff. While an ordinary corpus, it doesn't filter out anything, right? So it just rolls out whatever, and then it is the researcher who sets some, settings or restrictions or filters and goes, like depending on the research purposes. But Ludwig does everything for you. Also, Ludwig has a lot of nice functions apart from searching. You can translate. You can compare frequency, you can compare appropriacy. It's also very, very nice too. But the problem, maybe it's not a problem, but the thing about Ludwig is that it features these resources that I've just mentioned, like the Independent, the New York Times, the Guardian. And the conclusion to be drawn is that it's quite formal. Maybe not super formal, but it's formal and written, right? So, and we might assume that this might be not something we need for speaking, right? So it's predominantly for writing. And when it comes to speaking, I really love the resource, again, that you have recommended, Do People Say, right? Based on Reddit. I think that Do People Say does more or less the same thing as we do with Twitter on our own. So it just searches some posts published on Reddit, which is something like Twitter, but a little bit more
informal language.
Informal language, right? The way people speak, actually. Yeah, so that's why we can say that if you need something less formal for speaking, you better go to either Twitter or to Do People Say. If you need something for writing, then Ludwig is like top notch. Another thing is this one, Youglish. Like, do you use it?
I mean, yeah, sure, everyone does. I think these days it's like a go-to resource.
Yeah, and I love English not only because it features, some language, again, spoken, less formal, but if you want to hone your pronunciation, it's a must. Why? Because we can check a pronunciation of a word in a dictionary, that's for sure, but you remember that there is such a thing as connected speech, and unfortunately, dictionaries can't help you with that. But English can, so if you put a chunk in English, it will feature some YouTube speakers saying this, and you can just imitate this and practice not only vocabulary, but also pronunciation, which is really, really valuable. This is
really. For some reason, when we think of English, we think of context, vocabulary, but pronunciation should be factored in here, there. Yeah, you can literally like put in a phrase, look up many contexts, also UK, Australian, US English, even Canadian English, even Russian. You can even look for context for Russian. It could be your like corpus. German, Italian, Chinese. It's getting bigger and bigger. I think English now is like the top dog, when it comes to. And also one more thing that I mentioned was if you sign up, you can store those contexts there on the website. You can like save them. I think it's awesome,
Exactly. Absolutely. That's fantastic. And the little thing I'd like to save our followers from is that people often might think, and I feel that because whenever I'm talking about corporate to my students or to anyone, what I hear them thinking about is that they said, yeah, I'm not a native speaker, that's why I have to do all that stuff. But if I were a native speaker, I would be more kind of confident about it. Forget about this, because this is rubbish. Why? Because when I'm writing my posts in Russian for my blog or whatever, the first tab I have open in my computer is, can you guess? The corpus of the Russian, the national corpus of the Russian language, right? Because yes, I check collocations in Russian. And it's not, I hope, that I'm bad at Russian. I hope, at least I deem myself to be quite good at Russian. But the thing is that you can never be confident. Sometimes you can find something more precise, you can find something more natural, you can find something that collocates better. And that's fine. This is just the way language works. And no matter what language we are actually talking about.
Oh, yeah. Wow. This is something really incredible. I myself, again, guilty as charged. I do not actually use corpus when I write in Russian, but I don't write much in Russian. But at the same time, I know that my Russian could be really terrible. Sometimes when I start speaking Russian, I'm like, did I say it right? Why am I stopping? Am I a speaker of Russian or not? Like, what the hell is going on? It's all a lack of exposure. Yeah, especially if you're trained, by the way, for those who are training to be translation studies majors, yeah, like, or interpreters, it's important to boost your Russian first, even,
Absolutely.
right? It's not about
Absolutely.
English. Right.
Exactly. And this is what often gets overlooked. People say, okay,
Hmm.
English is a must, but then it turns out that perhaps Russian sometimes is a little bit more important, even if you translate from English into Russian. Here, Russian should take precedence over, because you more or less catch the meaning, but you have to render this in Russian precisely and appropriately.
And I think you know it best because, as far as I know, you did your master's in discourse, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you studied all of those texts and how to go about them and how to use them, how to speak eloquently, how to present yourself, right? So it's really important.
Yeah, it was more or less into this academic stuff of how language works, and this has so much immensely influenced my perception of language. And
Hmm.
that's why I started preaching, lexical approach and advocating lexical approach even stronger. So this is basically how language works, and that's why I'm a huge fan of lexical approach now.
See?
So
And that makes all of us, not to,
yeah,
and I think having watched this live stream, guys, not only did it inspire you, yeah, and also show you that you can do anything you want if you see fit, if needs be, but it also nudged you to use something, because I think that's why we need such conversations. They may look like blah blah, like, oh, it's easy for you to say, yeah, but if you really watch it back a few times, you have a notepad to your hand and you write down some ideas and try some of them, you will definitely fall in love with the lexical approach and Natasha.
again, gosh. Yeah,
Well,
so
that's true.
the thing that we have been preaching today is, again, this is all about common sense, and this is all about conscious approach, and just think, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing that? Okay, I see that I'm making progress, but what exactly allows me to make this progress? Maybe I
Yes.
have to stick to this, to that. And that's exactly something that kind of, made me fall in love with chunks, because this was something I have to say thank you to you for my language, I believe.
Yes, and again, you are practicing what you're preaching, and that's what I like about my guests of honor. I invite only the people who practice what they preach, who are incredibly good, who can give something to the table, and also who are always thirsty for knowledge. That's what I want. You see, that's what I need. And I think that's what is really working out great, as you can see, guys. We're going to wrap up in a minute or so. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took something on board. I hope you liked some, chunk time with us. I do not think that is the last live stream with you, Natasha. I'm sure we have so much to discuss, not just chunks. We're not like that crazy. We're also teachers with a lot of interests, yeah, and a lot in our toolbox to offer. So I really do not say goodbye. I say see you later, as they say.
Okay, see you. I'll be happy to. And thank you very much, everyone who watched us. We have been a bit too lengthy, but you see how terribly passionate we are about these things. It's difficult to
I'm
keep
like,
us.
really, 2 hours? Like, no, 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 please talk, speak more.
Yeah.
I could talk for hours, guys. So if you're really
Yes.
passionate, you will watch this from cover to cover, as they say, yeah? Yeah, thank you so much, guys. We're
Thank
seeing
you.
your thank yous. Natasha, thank you so much for your time. I
Yeah,
know how busy
thanks a
you are.
ton. Thanks a ton for inviting me. It was fantastic. I now feel even more infected with this chunk approach,
Yeah.
and I should really definitely, mind some article for chunks right now. So
Yeah, like a virtual hug. See,
yeah, yeah,
you know
exactly.
what? I am so incredibly happy to have you here because, for your information, guys, Natalia Potapova, she is quite a busy girl. First of all, you have a lot of different lives and, speeches to make. Even yesterday, you spoke at a conference, yeah, in front of a lot of people online. You have C1, C2 groups, which you're definitely supposed to check out. Natasha is the one that I would really go to study with, literally. Like, if I had something that I really need to work on, if I weren't that aware, I would be like, Natasha, I will pay you top dollar, help me get out of this gloomy world of chunks. And that's what you do best. So thank you so much. I hope to see you in next live streams. And thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. Thank you
Have
so
a
much.
great day.
Beautiful day. Yeah, have beautiful chunks. And see you next
Yes,
time.
and spice up your classes with chunks, for God's sake. See you
Absolutely.
soon.
Yeah. See you.
Bye.
Bye.